You won't find our real story of war and peace in his storybooks. Although reading between the lines of your basic 7th grade accounts of each savage empire is a start. Now, keep your eyes open with basic astronomy, archaeology, evolution, and sociology. Fill in the gaps with your love of oppressed, abused people everywhere. And finally, your curiosity. What went wrong with fundamentally decent humanity? Okay, let's begin again. God flew out with the Big Bang. Hydrogen and helium broke up into the many elements, and as planet cooled around the stars, uranium formed and troubled him. He thought, one day, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, and water will organize into bright, loving beings everywhere. Hunters will kill for meat, but suppose they begin abusing their new technology, attack each other, and multiply uranium bombs. I didn't plan on entire planetary civilizations self-destructing like individual but necessary deaths. Boy, was that uranium, and probably a couple of my creatures' confusing, dangerous, intelligent talents, my big mistakes. Some poor joke that folks think I'm perfect when I'm only human? Or is there some devil out there planting radioactivity, booby-trapping my beautiful worlds, returning most all of my hopeful, loving, living projects to fiery Genesis, getting the last laugh? Of 1 billion rocky, temperate, watery planets, several million spawned plants and animals. Evolution rushed ahead whenever two sexes provided the trial and error of a myriad genetic combinations. Often the aggressive gender killed for food, and the more loving one nurtured the kids. Before organized technology, the hunter never lifted club or hatchet or spear against his mate, child, or neighbor. Males knew God, loved females, protected children, and respected and cared for each other. More than some of his worlds, little Earth excited God one epoch, but grieved him the next. Humans enjoyed the usual couple of million Garden of Eden years. Without advanced technology to tempt and confuse them, the occasional genetically aberrant bully only stunted his family's reproduction, so kind men multiplied as nasty ones did not, beyond a flat minimum. We were nurtured by cave and field clans, effectively matriarchies. The total absence of murder, despite ample lethal weapons, strongly suggests that God's and Mother's laws of love prevailed, men declining to bring home forcible domination from the hunt. The good morale and efforts of the smaller and weaker were as essential to the tiny struggling groups as the power and pride of the mightiest hunters. So basic human rights were generally not perfectly respected. Give the weak their desires and freedom. They could not just take with muscle and clenched fists. Their cleverness and charm are more fun for all than bullying them into subservience to powers and stuff we hadn't invented yet anyway. Do not grant more meat and freedom to the more useful and talented dependents. Only later will civilization advance oligarchs with bribery. Never stock extra weapons unneeded for the hunt, lest a few bad apples intimidate or attack neighbors. In 10,000 years, they'll finally remember our brilliance and beauty just in time to save the world. Thus, corruption, tyranny, arsenals of war, and murder were outlawed and vanquished in ancient humans and God's fledgling societies. Love, even from people always capable of anger, selfishness, fear, and even hate, evolved and prevailed as effective law and practice. But then, in one single day, our story descends into a 10 millennia nightmare caused by male hunting instinct, confusing new technology for survival imperatives, now ever since inviting greedy, blind abuse and murder. Remember, as you listen, that our long, tragic, modern experiment finally proves our opportunity to restore our exact same laws against corruption, tyranny, and arsenals of slaughter enforced by God, women, and men for 2 million years. Now we need only to revise them to cover our fancy technologies, businesses, and governments. A terrible long drought finally confronted the tiny clan of cave dwellers with imminent death. One night they huddled around a little fire. Heads hung, emaciated faces flickered eerily. "No meat, no berries," barked the hunter's leader. "Look at different, strange folk across valley. Dip last water from stream onto seeds. Make food from new plants. Farmers fat while we die." The wisest mother spoke. "Ask them for bread. Teach us to farm. We give labor. And when drought ends, hunt for all," replied the hunter. "Strangers different, so we must hate them. They laugh at once proud hunters on knees. Bar bread shack door. Make weapons and gather men to stop attack. Always we have killed for food. Now we can cut sleeping throats, take bread, and survive." "No," cried the woman. "God in sky say, do not kill, do not steal, love neighbor like us. Together we keep God, live tomorrow. You forget greatest human lesson. Attack and use animals is nature. Attack and use people is evil." But man wrenched his fevered glare from woman's beseeching human eyes and bit the apple, dragging them all into the savagery of civilization. "No!" he shouted. "Woman's place now only in cave with children. Every hunter now bring all weapons to stalk and kill new prey. No woman, child, or alien farmer can stop us. Men now rule all new things beyond cave, always new hunts. To take others' work we enslave, to take many things we kill. Why? So that rush of power and happiness inside our heads keeps feeling same as joy of getting food and sex to survive. Bleeding heart women interfere with our new world of power and amusing, beautiful objects. Their mercy would only make us strong, rich men weak and poor again. Eons of women's rule over. All new needs needs only satisfied by special friends and servants of male dictators who take and kill at our command. Survivors of man's first massacre respected and obeyed the new order. 6 hunter enforcers, each with a hatchet in one hand and a spear in the other. Their leader became Mayor General of the little row of huts beside the patches of grain. Farmers and families we did not kill will deliver us grain, but I don't want them defeated and angry. Bring me an artisan to carve tokens for us. We'll trade them to the farmers for food, and someday the land itself. In time, other artisans eyed the farmers' coins of value and sold them bowls and pots. Money spread to every productive worker as the artisans kept making more for the leader, whose soldiers captured another village and returned with 10 strong but unarmed, intimidated men. Arm them too, the general ordered a weapons crafter. Now my growing army needs more coins for bread than several artisans can make me. So all my subjects will give me 5 coins every season to pay for their defense against enemies we make for them. Ha ha ha! And this no one will ever dare change. 1 year passed of conquest and expansion. My troops are well paid, remarked the general, which leaves less money and other riches for me than history's greatest leader deserves. Send for our 4 best spear and hatchet makers. The weaponeers listened quietly. 2 of you will prosper with my taxpayer business, and 2 will go hungry. Now I will measure each of you, not for craftsman's skills, but for ambition. You all pay me taxes like everyone else, and you will continue thus. But now, empty your waste bags. 2, with foresight, had brought many coins, and the leader gathered them for his personal chest. You too will stay busy for a good income until my personal supply needs expanding. Then you'll always know how to win more of my favor and business. And why should not such a brilliant system of taking taxes for us work forever? In time, many favored artisans, especially spear, hatchet, club, knife, and bow and arrow makers, wisely continued bribing the leader from their good incomes. When the general had 20 villages under his command, his allied nobles delivered to him portions of their spoils of wars. Their own taxes and his rose to what the prosperous could afford, as the poor could not. The most ruthless, aggressive leaders and soldiers amassed booty for healthy wives and large families. Thus, an increasing percentage of hyper males, many with an extra Y chromosome, has dominated the violent and corrupt leadership jobs of his story ever since. Mankind, led by men unkind, expanded thanks to agriculture to states and nations. The growing percentage of genetic bullies, always unduly represented in the conqueror-killer jobs, no longer beat the wife and kids into early graves, but came home sated from subjugation and combat to pamper them with good food and idle pleasure. So ever more vicious leaders and dominant soldier killers were culled from these sizable families, spawning 1 or more truly nasty punks each. which explains the 10,000 years of ferocious kings and armies slaughtering across the planet, culminating with the Caesars, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, and father and son Assads, n'est-ce pas? And the billion or so somewhat nicer but still slightly callous guys laboring to uphold our dominate, steal, kill, power pyramid. Most of my talks promote a clever couple of legal tricks to restore us girl-happy genetic wimps to authority. And a bunch more ladies themselves when elections ain't rigged and voters brainwashed. At the glorious height of one grand chieftain's career, several thinkers desperately strode into the ruler's council and appealed, "Please hear us, O great one. The people live poor under your rich kingdom. They obey from fear of enemies you made and greater fear of your own cruel soldiers. Our taxes are taken for your wars, nobles, luxuries, and family. Our rewards are poverty, danger, and death. Any one of us caring thinkers would gather the public's money only to care for the needy and build public works, not to make the rich richer and the violent deadlier. Before grain, money, property, government, armies, and dictators, men led hunts, women led families, and both saw to friendly, cooperative neighborhood society. But now you men alone take our labor, things, freedom, and keep killing ever so many people everywhere. Your new science grows us to thousands, someday millions, but most in tyranny and misery, all to enrich, empower, entertain, and delight a few thoroughly evil men. When we're through telling you off, those priests get another piece of our minds. Stop imitating war bosses with your fear, human sacrifices, and religious taxes. Instead, preach human laws of love, not just to us victims, but straight to you abusers. Remind us of divine and human love taught to each other before bosses and priests took it away. Your reform begins with no more bribery. Of all the lucky guys in the world, you're the one who wouldn't even miss birthday presents. So give us a break, buddy. Your best human law to start with should be, let's permit a few weapons for hunting, but none for wars, conquests, and brutal enforcement of your domestic kingship. Then villages for 100 miles will love our friendship once we ask their people and leaders to return our love and cooperation. As we all break extra arrows and spears, smaller but stronger defenses cannot be used for invasions. Then greed, power, and hate keep shrinking without the raging fire of murder. Then you will be encouraged, no, required, to lead us with valued care, not greedy brutality. The general signaled his soldiers to hold each thinker fast. He announced, "Were I to pamper the people, my own heart of joy with power would break, and surely all you unimportant people would grieve for your leader's despair." So at his signal, a soldier's spear rent each thinker's brave, loving heart and banished their humanity from the earth. Now, my friends, for your courage to confront, you will not be executed, but may indeed save us all. So please summon a fraction of the loving courage of the first peace and justice martyrs and act. My story, I believe, as do many sociologists, is not fiction but extrapolated fact. Archaeologists record war's sudden beginning exactly as agriculture began. Hunting instinct, exposed to technology, caused the most aggressive men to organize government, to capture commerce, and vice versa, to make war for profit. Suddenly, villages many times larger than the tiny hunter-gatherer groups invited leadership by men who had been rewarded by attacking humans for food. Now new prizes rapidly beckoned, developed land, money, and artwork. Citizen farmers, rusty with hunting weapons, were easily tyrannized by a general's cadre of soldiers, honing their killing skills on people best subtracted from their new possessions. Mere decades might have passed before the grain-fed population explosion was forever trampled by unlimited taxation, arsenal building, and powerful military, noble, priest, and merchant classes, each bribing leaders to steal taxes for them. Precise lack of family ethics and laws made public keeps the human hunters kings to this day. Most nations now lie to people that they are obedient to their democratic Republican constitutions, while contentedly reverting to laissez-faire commercial military oligarchies. Only ending bribery and weaponeering would bring women's loving guidance back, even without forcing men to hand over most public power jobs to peaceful, kind, caring females. For 2 million years it was not female domination, but male understanding of love's rewards without techno-corruption and militarism that saved the world for all but the last 10 of 2,000 millennia. Now, everything desired for us by classic conservatives, moderates, and liberals is only available by working for overthrow of tyranny's tools by laws damned similar to my proposals. So for 10,000 years, great powers followed the exact same formula. Hyper males, government business collusion for nearly infinite, not to mention ridiculous and unnecessary power through dominance, theft, and murder, always confusing their manufactured technology addiction for natural pleasure and survival. Wreaking evil just like most active drug addicts, destroying all to feed the craving. Excuse me. Each major new possession of technology, improved land and harvests, money, tools, and art motivated more armed coercion, theft, and killing, always becoming another dopamine rush, confusing acquisition for survival, mistaking their seizure of artificial, subhuman, evil power for our natural instincts to capture and kill for meat. These new drives for the techno-drugs of dominance desperately needed laws of restraint or prohibition, just as toxic drug addicts only recover by enforcing their present and future abstinence. Sometimes, in a few countries, during a few centuries, some people learned from this harsh monotony of history that only the clearly suggested moral, legal, and physical limits implemented and enforced would stop these classic crimes. They thought taxes must not be allowed to take more than needed to give care that some private individuals cannot arrange. Countries must agree to strengthen defenses by reducing offenses, not expanding them for attack. Nearly all people and businesses will prosper more if neither are allowed to bribe leaders to deliver our public care money to private profiteers, arranging bonanzas for public servants who ain't. As huge numbers of great weapons used by huge numbers of paid men are the entire physical cause of useless evil war, public and private money for most all construction, sales, purchase, and use of these unlimited amounts of slaughter machinery by attacking hordes must be simply, largely, legally, and financially prohibited. Only then may we have peace, prosperity, respect, and equality. Desperately needed public care and love only begins once deadly public abuse is finally, fully blocked. Then our dying world lives again. But then, did each thinker throw up his or her hands and surrender to the power and murder mongers without fighting or even writing for these simple human just laws, then returning to work only for their romantic and biological love of one private family? You do understand that my simple review of his story is also allegory of today's unchanged evil destroying our tomorrow, unless you fight not against original sin, but modern perversion. I would restore every true constitution and loving religion, gracing humanity's divine experiment and hope. But I can't. Only you, we can and must. I have actually overstated my conclusion that leaders from ancient times depended on bribery to make their obscene fortunes. Let's recall that the predominant monarchs achieved even more giant rip-offs. Business bribery of leaders did not comprise as high a percentage of total income of history's total dictators compared to executives and legislators of republics. Kings basically owned, or more accurately stole, any portion of their country's treasury they desired. Favored businessmen and all richer classes were either smart or forced to pay tribute. But the king robbed everybody else too, so just payoffs for government business so just payoffs for government business didn't make his whole day. The general scheme, however, never changes. Strong men scratch each other's backs with public loot, impoverishing and killing the masses who earned it and need it. Modern elected officials are not allowed to just shovel the national treasure into their personal palace vaults. So they must exploit their power to hand out our gazillions to certain businesses by demanding, "Give me back regular chunks so we can keep each other rich on public loot." The overall story is exactly the same. A few elites rob us all for war, which hammers down even more power and theft. The solutions are still the same. Lower taxes, no borrowing, people's choice and power of peace or war, disarmament down to defense levels, and no bribery. I mean, campaign gifts. Make these laws to determine that our leaders must be honest, kind employees who have to and want to keep them. Numbers of modest little nations avoided some of the harsher symptoms of this corrupt sickness. Though I don't have the historical expertise to tell you their various ratios of voluntary or traditional ethics to lack of opportunity to enforced legal restraints. But any parent will tell you that pleading often doesn't work. Then you reach out and grab the little buggers. Make necessary law and then enforce it. I suspect that the history of my common sense ideas is actually rather uncommon, because unsupervised, unrestrained male leaders often get greedy, crooked, and violent, and thinkers are seldom fighters, and nobody pays them to overrule authorities. And the rest of us join war movements 100-1 over peace movements and save our ethical passion for our families. But still, a few folks must have argued against the ever-repeated techniques or linchpins of political corruption and aggressive national murder and appealed for the same ethical, behavioral, public limits that every loving private family knows by heart. Pun intended. My little advances are legal argument and direction, and hopefully well-organized rabble-rousing. You, of course, are the rebel. None finer. Doesn't 8th grade ancient history report that technology and war came roaring in as a brand new pair? But where, now, or ever past, have we heard a nice, loud opponent of nakedly evil leaders stealing and killing for power shout, "These are the shockingly obvious and necessary new laws, same as your parents, to match and halt their predictable, tyrannical strategies"? And with or without such bizarre, unseemly shouting as mine, is the history of in opposition to Mr. Technology Business War Government Boss, projecting without change humanity's awful demise? Just a shade too subtle, thanks to ultimately distracting propaganda. To thump our damn noggins, hearts, and muscles into gear? Of the tiny bunch who may have briefly spoke up for urgent public reforms to directly attack and defeat government's all-too-legal collection of private profits and mass arsenals, through past millennia, some were killed, others were laughed at, most were ignored, and virtually all survivors, after a time, gave up and return full-time to their known rewards and confidence of loving, caring for, and protecting their own families, and to a lesser extent, their personal friends and career colleagues. Too bad no one kept reminding them that history is full of successful reforms outside of or within certain fractions of some governments, always led by men and women who never quit. Some of you remember Jim Carrey's overconfident, grinning, green-masked man busting moves on the dance floor. "Somebody stop me!" Reminds me of an unknown Texas Ranger who once said, "There's no stopping a man who knows he's in the right and keeps a-comin'."